Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and thank you for calling me in this important debate. I would like to thank the Backbench Business Committee for granting the time, and to thank my right honourable friend, the member for North Durham, and his colleagues from the Defence Committee for securing this debate at this time. I'd like to concentrate my remarks, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on procurement and the failure to support British jobs and communities, but also to make reference to the important contribution and some of the challenges facing veterans, particularly given that Easington, the constituency that I represent, is a high recruitment area for our armed forces. I would wish to declare my register of interest that I'm a member of Unite the Union and have the honour of chairing the United Parliamentary Group. And again, echoing some of the comments of my right honourable friend, I want to point out that UK defence has undergone a decade of decline under successive Conservative governments. And indeed, Conservative governments in its various coalitions and manifestations have overseen a steady erosion of our armed forces' numerical strength and capabilities, with cuts in frontline personnel since 2010 of over 45,000 and £8 billion real term cuts to the defence budget over this period. I was rather hoping, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the government had finally accepted the need for a long overdue change in defence procurement policy, and I welcomed the end of open competition by default that was introduced in 2012 by the coalition government. This had seen defence procurement effectively offshored by the Conservative Party at the cost of tens of thousands of UK jobs and businesses. Clearly, with a Conservative government, there's no guarantee that defence procurement will be concentrated in the United Kingdom. And in evidence to support this statement, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would like to point out that in May, the government announced a £1.6 billion competition to acquire 3 new Fleet Solid Support ships. The new Royal Fleet auxiliary ships will carry munitions and provisions for the Royal Navy's 2 new aircraft carriers. My trade union, Unite the Union, has expressed concern that the government is allowing bidders to work in partnership with foreign companies to create a false image of work being integrated into UK yards. Unite has rightly branded this a smoke and mirrors deception. In reality, the contract could be won by a UK-led bid, but then designed and largely built overseas. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are UK ships that need to be designed and built in the UK, using core UK technologies, including UK engineering skills and UK products such as steel. The Defence Secretary and UK government must now show their commitment and faith in UK workers' skills and expertise. UK shipyards are a vital part of local economies and could play a significant role in the government's much-stated levelling up agenda. I may say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, personally, Labour would go much further and set a higher bar for defence procurement. And I'm delighted by the decision to adopt a British built by default policy adopted by my party, the Labour Party. This would require ministers to prove that military equipment cannot be built in the UK before buying off the shelf from abroad. We heard some very interesting and indeed alarming figures from my right honourable friend, the member for North Durham, in respect of the levels of expenditure from the defence budget on US procured weapons. The integrated review makes clear that threats to Britain are increasing. UK forces may be deployed further from home, yet the government's plan is for fewer troops, fewer ships and fewer planes over the coming years. Deeper cuts to our armed forces will limit our capacity to simultaneously deploy overseas, support allies, including during natural disasters, and maintain our own strong national defences and resilience. As such, the UK risks being out of step with the defence plans of other leading NATO allies. Indeed, Canada plans to increase its regular service personnel by 3,500. Labour's commitment to international law, to universal human rights, and to multilateral treaties and organisations that uphold them is total. Finally, I want to pay tribute to the invaluable contribution of the armed forces to the national COVID-19 response in what's become the biggest ever domestic military operation in peacetime. I'm appalled that a survey by SAFA, the Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen and Families Association, found that 40% of Britons surveyed were unaware that the armed forces had supported the fight against COVID. A further 53% surveyed did not know the armed forces had helped with the UK's COVID vaccination programme. This is no reflection on the armed forces, but more it's a failing on the part of government to recognise and commend the armed forces' vital contribution to the pandemic response. Government failures, however, go beyond military service, and I want to mention the veterans here. From substandard housing to veterans' mental health and social care, the government is failing to provide our veterans and their families with the respect and support their service should afford them. Our veterans are left alone or reliant upon charities if they fall on hard times. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is quite simply unacceptable. Due to the lack of support for veterans' mental health, the community is taking it upon themselves to help their comrades. Veterans in my constituency and the surrounding area are fortunate. We have the newly established East Durham Veterans Trust, a charity in my constituency providing practical assistance and mental health support to our veterans community. And I want to take this opportunity to thank its founder and driving force, veteran Andy Camus, for establishing the charity and for the invaluable support that he and the staff at the East Durham Veterans Trust provide, and indeed the volunteers. However, the charity the charity has a precarious existence. It's dependent upon fundraising efforts, on grants and donations from the community. And I know the generosity of this House, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and the Defence Minister on the front bench will appreciate the gaps in support. So while he's working on fixing these problems and bridging these gaps in provision, he will be pleased to know that he can make a personal donation if his staff Google justgiving.com East Durham Veterans. They can make a one-off donation or a regular monthly donation as they wish. And in case any other members missed the address, it's Google Just Giving East Durham Veterans Trust, and all donations, particularly considering it's Armed Forces Week, will be gratefully received. Finally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and related to the work of the East Durham Veterans Trust, can I highlight an e-petition by another East Durham veteran, David McKenna, The Fight of Our Lives, Reform Mental Health Support for Veterans. This petition asks the government to offer service veterans annual mental health checkups for 3 years following discharge. It creates a veterans mental health scheme offering ongoing screening for conditions such as PTSD and a rapid intervention service for veterans in distress, and requires coroners to record veteran suicide, which is a hidden epidemic in the community and does not get the attention it deserves. I hope the public will support this petition and help it hit the threshold to at least receive a response from government. In Armed Forces Week, I want to pay tribute to the Armed Forces and to those who have served. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we live in an increasingly dangerous world, and I hope the government will listen to today's debate and not repeat the mistakes of the last decade on the size of our forces, on finances, and on veterans' mental health care and support. Thank you.
Very much.